to my series of reviews leading up to the Avengers Endgame coming up in the next month. If you haven't been following me on my social media pages, I announced not too long ago that I'm going to be talking about each individual Avengers flick leading up to Endgame later next month. So, without further ado, let's begin with a review of the first Avengers from 2012 directed by Joss Whedon starring everybody. Well, not everybody, but you get what I mean. In similar fashion to Spider-Man 2 or The Dark Knight, I find it really hard to approach this movie and review it in an original format because I feel like a lot of stuff that you could say about it has been said by now, almost 7 years later. But to be honest, I really find it hard to not talk about this leading up to this new Avengers movie because this series, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has been so interesting and really exciting to see it unfold that this movie was the first time that we actually got to see it come to fruition after fans of the comics speculated and wondered for so many years, wanting to see a team up of their favorite characters from the Avengers team up on screen together in live action. Now, I remember at the time how a little over a decade ago when Iron Man and Thor and Captain America were coming out, I had no idea that these movies were in the same universe together. I just thought that they were their own thing, like Spider-Man or Batman or X-Men at the time. But then when I saw the trailer for the Avengers and you see Captain America and Iron Man in the same scene together, I thought, wait, what's going... Okay, I get it now. It was something that I couldn't really comprehend, and because I wasn't really following it at the time, I didn't really think much of it back then. But now, oh wow. Seeing it on opening day, it literally just blew my mind. As I've watched it more over time, especially watching it the other night, the movie just got even better because all of the implications of all the other films, like with Loki and Thor, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Infinity War, Iron Man, Captain America, Age of Ultron. There's so many of the movies have influenced this movie now. Everything feels more in focus now, and it made the experience even better for me. And if you guys haven't seen this movie 7 years later, or any of the other ones, I'm gonna go into some spoilers. I warned ya. Now you guys know what the plot of this movie is. Loki and his army of aliens are planning to attack the Earth on the orders of a certain entity that we all know from the recent movies, in his own attempt to justify himself as a worthy king of Asgard, and also to attack the planet that his brother holds most near and dear to his heart. And because of his threat, Nick Fury and the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. decide to form a team together. It's called the Avengers Initiative. Something that fans remember hearing back in the first Iron Man in the post-credits scene, and at the time most people, myself included, thought, what? Is that real? 4 years after that, it all came true. So Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. make it their mission to recruit certain people across the world, such as Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, and Thor, and Black Widow and Hawkeye, in order to band together to fight Loki and his army, and stop him for good. So the movie opens up, it's somewhere in the western United States, in an underground S.H.I.E.L.D. facility, where Dr. Selvig and certain scientists who are part of S.H.I.E.L.D. are working on the Tesseract, which is a mystic cube from Asgard, and at this point it's been acting up very strangely to where they try to figure out what's going on. But then Loki shows up, takes a scepter, brainwashes a couple of people, including Hawkeye and a couple of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, in the area that the Tesseract was being worked on, decides to blow up and collapse the entire underground arena. Nick Fury realizes that they need a response team. Now that opening scene, watching it the first time around back in 2012, I was a little underwhelmed by it, but now I don't actually think it's that bad. I mean, it definitely feels like a pilot for a TV series, since Joss Whedon was known for making TV shows like Firefly and Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Angel. You could definitely see some of that, especially in the first 20 or so minutes of the movie. Having seen the other movies now, it doesn't feel as claustrophobic or a lot more contained as I initially thought back then, but you could still tell that a guy who just came off a TV was behind the camera. And he does a really good job of reintroducing Loki into this movie. When he first looks up towards the camera with that evil grin on his face, and the way he starts shooting his scepter at everybody and brainwashing a couple of people, you're like, how are they gonna beat this guy? Oh, if they only knew about Thanos. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. They do a good job of making Loki seem like a really legitimate threat, because having seen the previous movie of Thor, you know that this guy has talked to someone who managed to prey on his insecurities. Now he's a lot more desperate to prove his point. Guys like that should not be toyed with. So Nick Fury and certain members of S.H.I.E.L.D. go around to people like Captain America, Iron Man, and Hulk, to try to recruit them in order to counter this threat that Loki's emitting. Black Widow goes to meet Bruce Banner, Coulson goes to meet Tony Stark, and Nick Fury talks to Steve Rogers. Now, having mentioned all that, as many people have pointed out, you would think that going into this movie that how are they going to balance all of these characters, these larger-than-life characters, all together in this one movie? It could have easily been a Spider-Man 3 situation, but the way Joss Whedon manages to weave the story together, because he also wrote this movie as well, not just directed, he managed to somehow find the right balance of giving each character something worthy to do. Having seen them in their own solo movies, it seemed like a good mesh of those sequels put together, but in just the right way, because they all go through different things, and they're adjusting to a new situation that they're in. Captain America, having woken up out of the ice, is trying to find his place in the world, and he's too afraid that nobody's going to accept his old-fashioned ways. Tony Stark is building a new tower in New York City. Despite having been through some stuff where he's actually wizened up a little bit and has more of a need to care for other people, he still has that textbook narcissism that he's known for. Bruce Banner, after that big fight in Harlem against the Abomination and the Incredible Hulk, is hiding out in India and is trying his absolute best to keep the Hulk at bay and not causing harm to other people and helping people in a way that he sees more fit. Each one of their reintroductions into this movie seems so realistic and very authentic, including Captain America and Bruce Banner's introductions. There's a scene where Steve is in a boxing gym punching a bag and he gets flashbacks to memories before he crashed into the ice, saying his last goodbyes to Peggy Carter. And then we see a vision of him being revived by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents going, oh my god, this guy's still alive. And Nick Fury talks about how things have changed since he went under the ice, and now that he's back, the world's a different place, showing him the Tesseract and how Howard Stark managed to recover it when he was looking for Steve in the ocean, and seeing Agent Coulson trying to recruit Tony Stark despite the fact that Tony Stark is not interested since he was written off as unfit for the Avengers. Yeah, apparently I'm volatile, self-obsessed, don't play well with others. Girl with Spy and Jarvis, I got a date. Probably the most enthralling introduction is Bruce Banner's introduction, where Black Widow is given orders to meet Bruce Banner in India and recruit him to come to S.H.I.E.L.D. The way this whole scene plays out, and the way Mark Ruffalo plays this character, you could tell that all this crazy stuff is going on inside of his head, and he's trying extremely hard not to lose his nerve. Speaking of which, so many people at the time were, lack of a better word, bitching about the fact that Edward Norton was no longer going to be Bruce Banner. When I saw that Mark Ruffalo had replaced him in the trailers, I thought, really? Mark Ruffalo? Wow, okay. I didn't really know what to think, but apparently a lot of people hated that idea at the time. But then when the movie came out, he got critically lauded for his performance. A lot of people considered him to be the best portrayal of the Hulk in live action. You know what? I cannot disagree with that. When I think of the Hulk, I think of Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk for me. And the way Mark Ruffalo plays his character out in that scene, you have the sense that he could seriously screw you up.
He needs me in a cage.
No one's gonna put you in a...
Stop lying to me! I'm sorry, that was mean.
Yeah, I would not want to be in Black Widow's position. And seeing Agent Coulson fanboying a little bit over Captain America, it's just, if I was in the presence of somebody like Steve Rogers or Iron Man, or even some of my favorite actors right now, I would probably react the same way that Agent Coulson does. I have some trading cards. They're vintage. And this is probably one of the most comic book inspired movies that I've seen in the last 20 years. The way that the helicarrier comes out of the water. First it looks like an aircraft carrier, but it actually flies in the air with those 4 turbine propellers pushing it off of the water. And obviously the costumes like Captain America's costume, Iron Man, and Loki's costume with the biggest horns on his head imaginable. But the way this movie plays itself and the way Joss Whedon tells the story, it actually feels very legit. It doesn't feel like, oh my god, superhero stuff? Pfft, this is stupid. In a way, I see it as like it's acknowledging that it is very comic booky and a bit stupid and a bit silly in some ways, but it goes with it anyway. And for the most part, it does take itself seriously. It obviously knows when to have fun, but when the serious moments come in, it takes it very seriously. It doesn't play it for laughs. And little moments like Captain America handing the $10 to Nick Fury, who said, $10 says you're wrong. And obviously Robert Downey Jr.'s comedic timing and certain scenes like this.
Monkeys. I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
Gotta love Cap. Finally, someone who speaks English. Is that what just happened? That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. How does Fury even see these? He turns. Sounds exhausting. And also there's this.
Loki is beyond reason, but he is of Asgard. And he is my brother.
He killed 80 people in 2 days.
He's adopted.
I still remember people bursting out laughing in the theater when I saw this. That was awesome. And Thor's introduction in this movie is actually really cool too. After Captain America confronts Loki in Germany and Iron Man comes in and manages to contain it, they take him on the Quinjet. Thor shows up and takes Loki away. Where is the Tesseract? I've missed you too. Do I look to be in a gaming mood? It's a really well-handled scene after the two brothers being distant from each other for a while. Thor's trying to reason with Loki, but Loki's just not having it. You can see how far Thor has come since the last Thor movie. He's definitely matured, but also in this movie, they do a good job of showing just how regretful he feels over his actions finally coming to fruition, having all those years of being rivals of his brother, and having him desperately want to fight in a war and being this great warrior, but when he gets to that point, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And I think it's perfectly illustrated in this scene where he's talking to Agent Coulson about that.
Loki's rage followed me here, and your people paid the price. And now again. In my youth, I courted war.
And there's also a really cool fight scene between Thor and Iron Man, which contains some of my favorite gags, such as when Thor has his hammer ready to strike Loki down.
You listen well, brother.
I'm listening.
Shakespeare in the Park? Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? And I love how during the scene, you see Loki just sitting on top of that cliff, just watching Iron Man and Thor just trying to tear each other apart. He could have easily taken off, but seeing how these two guys are going at each other and not focusing on the real threat, that's one of the indicators that you got a good villain in your movie. You can tell that he's more than likely planning on figuring out certain ways to get under each Avenger's skin. And Captain America coming in, trying to stop the whole thing by saying, "Put the hammer down." Well, I don't know about that. And then we have the second half, which pretty much all of it is spent on the helicarrier. A lot of it is walking around and talking in other rooms, and it could have easily been something really boring, like the sequence on Coruscant with the Phantom Menace, where it's just boring, stale dialogue, but not in this case. Joss Whedon, even though he finds a lot of snarky remarks to throw in there, he manages to write some really, really good lines in here and some really interesting dialogue that make you think that, what's going on here? Why is S.H.I.E.L.D. calling these guys in? Why not do this? Why not do that? Are they really the trustworthy people that they make themselves out to be? And as we've seen in other movies, that's obviously not the case. And Steve Rogers is more of a loyal soldier who's just wanting to do what he's told despite however he might feel about it. But Bruce and Tony managed to make him realize that, you know what? This doesn't feel right. And it's a perfect hint of what later comes to fruition in Captain America the Winter Soldier on how S.H.I.E.L.D. aren't exactly the good guys. All the while this is happening, Loki's just sitting in his cell, which is meant to be for the Hulk, sitting around just waiting for something to happen, and then Black Widow shows up right behind him. There's some words exchanged between the two of them, and we learned a little bit about Black Widow's past in this one, or at least we get a little bit of a hint of that. As she describes, "I have red on my ledger," and as she tells Hawkeye later on, "I'd like to wipe it out." As we all know from Age of Ultron, she was a member of the KGB in the Soviet Union, and she was conditioned to be a ruthless assassin for the KGB. And it's explained later on that while she was in a difficult position and Hawkeye could have killed her, he saw something in her that made her take pity on her, and he decided to spare her. And because she was rescued, she decides to join the other side in order to make up for all the things that she's done. And she's using this opportunity to help defeat Loki and hopefully to somewhat right the wrongs of her past. But Loki takes everything that she says and throws it right back at her in the way that even shakes Black Widow to her core. But she manages to control herself and deduces that he's using the Hulk to his advantage, which I have a feeling it could be, but I'm not really sure because based on Loki's response to that whole thing, kind of makes him seem like, wait, what are you talking about? But knowing that he's the god of mischief, there's no telling what this guy's gonna do. I just realized I never talked about it. Tom Hiddleston as Loki, he is the man. Probably the first word that comes to your mind when you see Tom Hiddleston as Loki, mischievous. God of mischief, makes sense. "This is my bargain, you mewling quim." What's the matter? Scared of a little lightning? "I'm not overly fond of what follows. Your allies are scattered. Exactly where is my disadvantage?" And Loki I find to be a very complex character in this one especially because, as I said before, after trying to prove himself as a worthy king of Asgard and despite his brother Thor, there's a scene where we see him talking to a certain type of alien character who is later to be revealed in the mid-credit scene as an advisor to Thanos. He wants to prove to the universe that he is someone to be reckoned with, but there's also a bit of conflict inside of him, that he is at this guy's mercy and that he might not really want to do what he's supposed to do. It's that really effective conflict between good and evil that's presented here. here. And Tom Hiddleston does a really good job of conveying that by not only saying it out loud, by also conveying it in his facial expressions. One small change in his facial expression, you know exactly what's going through his head, similar to Mark Ruffalo. And then later on, after Black Widow deduces that Hulk is being used by Loki, she confronts Bruce Banner in that laboratory, and a lot of the main characters are in there, such as Fury, Stark, Cap, and among others. Things start to come to light about S.H.I.E.L.D. using the Tesseract to build weapons of mass destruction because of Thor's presence on Earth, that each member of the Avengers is viewed as a potential threat by S.H.I.E.L.D. They start bickering with each other, spitting in each other's faces verbally, and then the way the camera sways around certain characters, and then it focuses on Loki's scepter, revealing that they're playing right into Loki's hands and exactly what he wants to happen. He wants them to take their focus off of him so he can accomplish his goal. And also, the rivalry between Cap and Iron Man, you couldn't have done it better. Cap being the good person that he is, and Tony being the narcissistic person that he is. Similar to Kirk and Spock in Star Trek 09. Both have strong personalities and different opinions. Yeah, they're not gonna like each other. Big man in an armored suit. Take that away, what are you? Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. And this exchange between the two, I think, is a perfect way of playing into Tony Stark's character journey in this movie, where Cap says,
I've seen the footage. The only thing you really fight for is yourself. You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play.
And you could tell that he's thinking, yeah, he's right. But then all hell breaks loose when Hawkeye, who's brainwashed by Loki, and certain other brainwashed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents sneak aboard the helicarrier and cause all this ruckus. An explosion happens where Black Widow and Hulk fall through the floor, and this pipe is laying on Black Widow's leg. Bruce Banner starts to lose control of himself. He's trying really hard. Black Widow tells him, don't do it, don't do it.
I will get you out of this. You will walk away and never ever...
Your wife!
Oh boy, that's not good. And there's a moment in here which always gets me every time, is when you see this look in Bruce's face just as he's transforming. You could tell that after how hard he's tried to keep the Hulk at bay, he's incapable of controlling himself, and that look he has in his eyes, oh, it gets me every time. Now, as far as Natasha and Bruce's relationship, it was criticized in Age of Ultron, but I'll get into that in the Age of Ultron review. I couldn't help but notice at the time that something was going on there between those two. They both did things that they're not proud of. There's obviously a common connection between the two. It's not so obvious, but the way I saw it at the time, and even now, you could tell that there was some kind of a spark going on between those two, which I think made some sense when they became an item in Age of Ultron. But like I said, we'll get to that in the Age of Ultron review. So Black Widow finally has the confrontation with the Hulk as the Hulk chases her throughout this hallway. Cap and Iron Man go to this turbine engine to try to fix it. Thor gets into a big fight with the Hulk, tries to calm him down, and has a great scene where he tries to get his hammer, but he has to wait at least 10 seconds before it finally comes through the wall. And Hulk tries to pick up his hammer, but it doesn't come off because nobody else can lift Thor's hammer, except for Vision, but we'll save that for later. Not quite as exciting as the final battle, but it's really, really well executed here, and it leads to probably the most poignant moment in the movie, is when Agent Coulson is killed by Loki. And Agent Coulson was a likable character in some of the other previous Marvel films, and still, seeing him get stabbed in the back, literally, it made me jump. And Thor's response, oh man, you really feel it. So Agent Coulson dies, half of the Avengers are scattered, Hawkeye has managed to recover after a big fight with Black Widow, with a classic hit to the head. And Nick Fury blatantly lies and says Agent Coulson's trading cards have blood on them. And he uses that as the ultimate push to get the Avengers to fight back against Loki and stop him for good. And you could clearly see how much it's shaken them, how they let their selfish natures and their rivalries towards each other get the better of them, that they lost focus on what they should have been focusing on. And as I said, they use Agent Coulson's death as the final push to stop the bad guys for good. Not a totally groundbreaking way in my estimation, but I think it's pretty effective. As for Hawkeye, this is one of my two flaws with the movie. The first one being that, how did Thor get back to Earth? Because I remember the Bifrost being destroyed at the end of the first Thor movie. And you hear Loki say something like, how much dark energy did your father master to conjure you here? Your precious Earth. Just like that, it's not really explained. And from what I can remember, it wasn't really explained in any of the other movies. So maybe it'll be explained somehow in a future movie, but I highly doubt it. Or maybe it'll be explained in Endgame, who knows. But yeah, I just wish they would have cleared that up a little bit. And Hawkeye, as far as the main characters, he gets the short end of the stick in this one in many ways. Jeremy Renner plays the part fine. He's not a bad actor by any estimation. I do like the guy, but he doesn't really have much to do here. And mostly because of the fact that he was brainwashed by Loki when he used his scepter on his heart and made him his pawn. But I do like the interplay between him and Black Widow, and you could tell that there's some kind of mutual respect going on between the two, especially having heard about how Hawkeye managed to spare Black Widow in this big fight that they were in a number of years ago. And I like how Black Widow manages to talk him out of blaming himself for all the people that died on the helicarrier when he was under Loki's mind control, because she has done a similar thing to herself for a long time and she doesn't want to see anybody else do it. So Tony Stark manages to figure out what Loki's up to. He goes to Stark Tower and has an exchange of words with Loki, where you get to hear the famous,
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
he said, "We can't protect the Earth, you could be damn well sure we'll avenge it." Tony manages to get the Iron Man suit on, but then the portal opens and the Chitauri come down and start wreaking havoc across New York City. Alien invasion movie tropes that we've seen a million times in other movies, but the way they played in this one, yeah, it's, I buy that as a legitimate threat. Little by little, the rest of the Avengers manage to show up, Bruce Banner showing up last, with this big alien worm ship coming down at them above Park Avenue. And then we get to see an awesome moment with Bruce Banner finally accepting the Hulk as a force for good, rather than just a curse. Because one thing that worked extremely well about Bruce Banner in this movie, after seeing so many times of him struggling with his alter ego as the Hulk, having seen Hulk portrayed as a monster rather than a superhero, yeah, that's definitely a part of his character. He doesn't want to lose his temper all the time and cause harm to other people. Obviously, you don't want that to happen, but Tony Stark shows him that, you know what, you might use it as a force for good, because I learned to use this as a force for good. So why can't you do the same? And we've heard about his secret and how he manages to keep the Hulk at bay for so long, and we're not really sure what that is, but then when we see the big worm thing coming towards the Avengers, and Cap says, now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
I'm always angry.
And then there's the money shot. And Alan Silvestri's score, by the way, amazing. One of the best superhero themes that I've ever heard. Coming from a guy who did the music for Captain America the First Avenger, Forrest Gump, Polar Express, and Back to the Future, this is among his best work. And then the famous climactic battle begins, the Battle for New York, which is a battle that was felt for many years in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, from Daredevil Season 1, Civil War, hearing it echo in Avengers Infinity War, and many other movies. And yes, it's a big battle against an alien army coming down from the skies, but you know what? Having seen all the characters get developed in their own way before this big battle happens, it makes it all the worthwhile. It's not just a bunch of mindless explosions, and the way Captain America issues an order to each member of the team, and lastly to the Hulk.
And Hulk. Smash.
Oh, I love that grin. I love it. And that one particular shot where we see all the members in one sweeping motion shot, where Iron Man is flying next to Black Widow, and then he flies down to help Captain America, and he flies up the wall of this one building, seeing Hawkeye pick out all these aliens flying by, to Thor and the Hulk fighting off all these aliens on top of that alien worm, and then crashing into Grand Central Station and Hulk doing this. Which, another funny moment, is when Hulk throws Loki around like a rag doll.
And I will not be bullied by that!
Again, I remember at the time when I saw this, people in the theater lost it, myself included. It never, ever gets old. After a while, things don't start to look so good for people on the ground and for the Avengers, so the SHIELD Council tries to get Nick Fury to launch a nuclear missile towards New York to wipe out the alien army, and Fury says no, so they order a lone pilot to fire the nuclear missile into the city. Fury gets word of it, warns Iron Man about what's going on, and Iron Man decides to make a heroic sacrifice by guiding the missile up into the wormhole to stop it from exploding in the city. And he manages to destroy the alien army coming in, but he sees it before it's destroyed. And seeing that, knowing how he's affected in the later movies, I got chills watching that. Whew. And he barely manages to get out alive. The Hulk saves him, the Avengers capture Loki, the world is saved. And we see a montage of news clips of people praising the Avengers to certain people being skeptical about them, including Stan Lee's cameo.
Superheroes in New York? Give me a break.
Oh, and also, there's this woman.
Captain America saved my life.
Ashley Johnson. Ellie from The Last of Us. So as Thor takes Loki back to Asgard, the rest of the Avengers go their separate ways. Agent Maria Hill laments to Nick Fury that, what if something like this happens again? They'll come back. You sure? Why? because we need them to. And the final shot is Tony and Pepper talking about something up in Stark Tower, and we see the lone letter A standing on Stark Tower, which symbolizes the new team that's arrived on the scene on Earth. And the movie ends. Not before 2 credit scenes, though. The mid-credit scene, where we see Thanos for the first time. To challenge them is to court death. At the time of this movie's release, seeing him in that scene, I thought, who is that? But watching it now, oh man, if we only knew back then. In the post-credit scene, all the members of the Avengers just quietly eating shawarma, as Tony asked about earlier. It's just a simple, quiet moment between the Avengers, just relaxing, having something to eat. You can't get any more simpler than that. Overall, the first Avengers, I think, is one of the best superhero films ever put into the genre. And it's right up there for me with The Dark Knight and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And you could say that the story isn't the most amazing or groundbreaking type of story, but like I said, the way Joss Whedon weaves this together, I find it to be a very effective movie overall. And in one way it is groundbreaking because we saw all these other larger-than-life characters in their own movies coming together as a team. In that one respect, that is one of the most groundbreaking things I've ever seen in a movie, and I'm sure many other people feel the same way. So those are my thoughts on the first Avengers movie. Did you like Avengers? Think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts. Stay tuned for my review of Avengers Age of Ultron coming up soon, and I will see you all next time.